Vishal, and again, always a pleasure to be demoing with the team at Optimus. Like Vishal mentioned, I mean, we had a really close relationship that started about a year ago, but has been probably one of the best relationships we've had in terms of partners. We always try to identify partners that we know are going to be good advocates for their clients. And so when we met the team at Optimus, that was just there in spades. So again, really excited to kind of build out that partnership. They've really, I've just seen time and time again, them kind of advising their customers on a number of things that are really going to be best for them. So excited to be working with that team. Yeah, today's overview is going to be called Building a Data Visualization to Get the Most Out of Your Organization's Data. This is based lightly on a summit presentation I'm going to be giving next week. So if anybody is going to be at, AXUG Summit or NAVUG Summit, BCUG Summit, or GPUG Summit, I know we've got actually a wide range of folks on the call. Definitely come in. You can see kind of a little bit more of the polished version of this overview. So if you are in Orlando next week, definitely come by. So a little bit about JET and a little bit about kind of, why I wanted to do this presentation. First of all, JET Global Data Technologies, for those of you that don't know us, we've been in the dynamic space for over 17 plus years. We've got 14,000 plus companies using JET on a daily basis to get information out of their databases. AX, GP, NAV, Business Central. Really, folks are coming to JET to take that information that's sitting in their ERP, and not only just their ERP, but also some other systems. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then pushing that to a place that they can actively work with it. For most users, we're really seeing a lot of reports in Excel. That's historically what we've done. But over the last couple of years, the one thing I've noticed really as a reoccurring theme is that executives are asking for dashboards. So that's kind of why I wanted to put this presentation together. I wanted to understand, okay, why are we so interested in wanting to see dashboards? What makes us tick and what makes us really want to get in there? What is really critical to helping dashboards be successful to develop your business? And then, what are some pitfalls? Because we've seen pitfalls of folks kind of struggling trying to get information out of their system into dashboards. So Matthew and I are going to talk through a couple options there and kind of hopefully get some folks to avoid some of the pitfalls that's going to come with that. And I always like to, just kind of start with this slide just to give some context of the flexibility of JET and our solutions. Again, we've got over 14,000 plus customers. You'll see it's a wide range of different industries. As you can imagine, all these different companies are going to have customizations and third-party add-ons. A Dynamics instance for a retail company is not going to be the same as a hospitality company. There's going to be customizations. There's going to be third-party add-ons. But with JET, we can read all of that information. As we get into an analytics practice, there's probably going to be other solutions. So other elements inside of their technology stack that they want to report against. It's kind of a universal truth across all these different companies. It doesn't matter what customizations they have. It doesn't matter if they have third-party add-ons. JET's able to pull that information out and do so in a way that is really going to help you drive better decisions and drive better business outcomes. So this next slide here, I really want to define data visualization. And you'll see I kind of use data visualization and analytics interchangeably. But from a data visualization standpoint, when I say that kind of on its own, we're talking about a really specific set of tools. These are going to be dashboarding tools. So the examples there are going to be, tools like Power BI or Tableau. JET has we have our own dashboard builder that can be used. These are front-end tools that are really optimized for the displaying of data. You can see an example right down here. I'll click up to a larger version. This was actually a dashboard I built for Optimus. But if you look at Power BI, if you look at Tableau, these are really tools where the focus has been around creating a good user experience and look and feel of those dashboards. Where we've seen challenges with a lot of users is the back end. And so that's kind of where we'll bring in the whole analytics suite and looking at how do you actually build a data model that's going to give the responsiveness that you're expecting with a dashboarding tool. And again, I threw Excel in here. I think, you can definitely argue Excel can be a data visualization tool. I actually have a couple of Excel dashboards that I'll run through, but it gets a little asterisk because a lot of the times that's either where you're doing some reporting or in some cases storing information that you're trying to visualize. So it gets a little asterisk there, but you can absolutely use Excel and get a lot of usage out of it from a data visualization standpoint. So clicking through that, you can kind of start thinking about how data visualization is going to help you run a more efficient business. Again, this is a example dashboard that I built for a grocers event that Optimus went to. And what this is a breakdown of some different sales numbers. And we've got a number of different KPIs that are put in here. And I'll show this example in a little bit. The nice part about this example specifically is that when you click through it, those KPIs change. And then you also see really kind of the richer element of the data visualization piece, which is not just graphs or KPIs, but actually having maps so you can go in and actually see, okay, well, where are our most profitable customers located? If you can think about how that might help you drive a better organization. If you're in the retail, that can show you where all your customers are. That can help you plan better, I guess, new store development. So deciding what store you want to set up depending on where your customers are located. Think about the same thing if you're in hospitality. Where are our customers located? Maybe how should that affect our marketing spend? Even looking into simple stuff like what items are we selling and when are we selling them can really help you drive a better business. But as I'll kind of mention here, there are going to be a few critical things that you're going to want to make sure are in place in order for you to go in and do that. And before we spend kind of too much time on actually the dashboards, I want to actually go into the basis for why I argue that humans specifically really want to work with dashboards as a whole. The first thing I noticed in my research was that users are going to visualize relationships and patterns very quickly. I'm going to actually take this opportunity to dispel a rumor that I'm sure a lot of you have heard, that humans process images 60,000 times faster than text. I've heard this statistic used a few times. It's actually, as far as I can tell, not correct. The best study that I found that kind of talks about that speed is a study that was done out of MIT in 2014. That found that humans processed images closer to 13 milliseconds. And this study is particularly interesting because the initial assumption with the study was that images would be displayed in about 50 milliseconds. And before the study, the current benchmark was looking at about 100 milliseconds. So if you compare that to words here, you're looking at images being consumed probably twice as fast as words are, but still not a whole lot, even kind of going down to 4 times as much. But as they tested this out, where they would display an image and ask people if they comprehended them or ask some questions if they comprehended them, they found that people can process image much faster than originally assumed. And you can actually see, again, that statistic, people can process images in 13 milliseconds. That's particularly interesting because that was the lower limit of the technology they were using. So that was the fastest frame rate that the computer that they were using to display images would show that information. So you can see, if you compare those two figures, humans are able to process images about 15 times faster than text. So we obviously are going to want to go towards data visualization because we know we can process that very quickly. But there are some concerns about that. If you don't believe me, let me show an example. I'm sure anybody that has a backyard has probably seen or can relate to this example. I certainly have done this a few times. I'll go into my backyard, maybe it's in the spring, grass is a little high. I will see that my hose is curled up and it looks like a snake and I will jump back. Now, I live in Portland, Oregon. We're not known for our snakes, but I'm still processing that image so quickly and I'm reacting to it before I actually rationalize what it is. It's relative to kind of what we want to have happen here. Obviously, we want images because we can get a sense of what's going on, but we also want to make sure we're doing our due diligence so that we're not just reacting to something because we see it quickly. We want to think about, okay, what actually is this? Is this something that will help us build our business? You can see Another reason that you'll see that faster data visual, or that faster, I guess, processing of images, is because a lot of that is done on a subconscious level. So you can see from this graph, obviously, in terms of how quickly information is processed, visual is far and ahead of any of the other senses in terms of how quickly information is processed. But then you'll see as soon as it goes from that subconscious bandwidth, so kind of the rear portion of the brain up to the front portion of the brain, where you're really doing a lot of logical work, you'll see that the actual bits per second explode. So yes, I'm processing stuff faster, but I'm getting more information when I'm consciously working with it. Specifically, if I'm working with it and hearing it, kind of talk a little bit about working, feeling it, and other senses, but really the visual is always going to be kind of the leader here. And that actually segues nicely into our next piece, which is that not only will people quickly process information that they see, they're going to better understand it when they're kind of interacting with it visually. Jerome Bruner, who did a lot of study on kind of the process of education and how people learn, kind of put together these factors. And I think they're specifically relevant for the data visualization market. You look at it, obviously, we're looking at, people remember 10% of what they hear, 20% of what they read, 30% of what they see. Now this is, obviously if I just see a graph, I'm only going to retain about 30% of that. But where a dashboarding tool will set itself apart is this last point. People are going to remember 80% of what they see and do. And why I think this is important is that if you're using a dashboarding tool, you're able to slice and dice information. You're able to look into trends and interact with it. And I think you're going to have a much better understanding of your business if you do this. I know Hector at the Optimist team loves talking about how he wants his clients going in and slicing, dicing data. I think this is kind of the best way to do it. And I think a lot of the value is you're just going to remember more about your business when you're doing that. And I don't know about you, but if I am looking at, two different companies, and one company has a data visualization tool and they really understand their business and they know their business inside and out, and another business kind of knows their business but not to the same level, you can guess who I'm going to want to invest with. I'm going to want to invest with that company that knows their business inside and out, that knows all those trends, that knows those nuances. So yeah, pretty apparent here. That's kind of how it can help, or how data visualization can help you personally. Now, if we bring that out to more of a business level, again, I think this is probably pretty clear, but we'll talk through it. How will data visualization help your business? Well, improved insight. And this one is a pretty easy one to display. If you think about, if I'm looking at sales in a grid view report, and then I want to look at that against a graph, and then you ask me, okay, which months were most profitable? I am going to be able to see that much quicker with a graph than I would with a grid view. You'll also be able to see that, if I'm using data visualization, I can decide, where are trends existing versus outliers. I can easily factor stuff out to see, okay, maybe that we had one kind of spike of sales in August, but historically those never happen. And it was one large sale that was specifically unusual that kind of threw our numbers off. So giving that improved insight is always going to be critical. The other thing is that this is going to provide faster decision making. The example I like to use about this is, think about a marketing analyst trying to track where the most effective marketing spend is. Anybody that works in marketing knows that's a challenge. So if they're going in and they're trying to do that, maybe they're trying to report against 20 or 30 different systems. They need to go in and get their marketing information from their Google Analytics systems. They need to go in and get their information from Facebook and LinkedIn, and maybe they're doing some other advertising. So they've got maybe a number of different systems that they're all trying to pull together. And then they're also trying to report that against sales. So they're going to need to go into their Dynamics database and pull all that information into one location. And once they have that all set up, they're going to have to make it so it all relates to each other. So they can say, hey, we got all of these sales from Facebook. Let's look at our Facebook marketing spend. Let's tie that together in one worksheet. And then once they have that set up, they're likely to want to actually build out a graph. that's a fairly difficult process. It's going to take a long time to simply answer a question of, where's our most effective marketing spend? And so if you're trying to do that with just all of the systems without kind of a full data visualization analytics approach, it's going to be fairly difficult. But if you have a full analytics approach, you can go in and connect that in a single location. So you can go in, you can tie all of that together, and then you can have one central location where you can see all of that information. And you can see that it's already all tied together. And the fact that it's tied together is also going to help you start asking better questions. So you can think about that marketing analyst in that example that I had. Maybe they want to ask, well, maybe are certain months better are certain months providing better performance for some of our marketing platforms than others? These are the sort of things that users are going to be able to do with an analytics solution. And so next step I want to look at is actually, okay, well, what are the stages of visualizing data? And this is actually from this book here, Visualizing Data. It's a fairly technical read. Ben Fry, who studied at MIT, wrote this. And really the intention with this, I'll run through these stages, but from my perspective, I think really the intention with these 7 stages of data are if you're looking at much more complex data sets. Maybe users want to look at the spread of a specific disease throughout a country. They might go through all these different steps. So I'll list them, but the good news is that if you're a Dynamics user, most of these steps are already done. If you're a Dynamics user using a full analytics approach, pretty much all of these are done, and you really just have to focus on one of them. But we'll run through all these. So going to that first stage, acquire. You want to obtain the data, whether it's from a file or a disk or a source. You want to parse it out. So you want to have some structure to the data's meaning. You want to filter it out, so you only want to pull in what's going to be relevant. You want to make sure everything's ordered and you don't have duplicate examples. You want to mine data, so you want to apply some sort of statistic methodology or data mining as a way to sort of see patterns and place data in a mathematical context. You want to represent that data. So you've cleaned it up in stages 1 through 4. Now stage 5, we're actually visualizing that, so we want to represent that. We want to put together an initial graph. And then we want to refine that. We want to say, okay, maybe the bar graph that we chose isn't the right approach. Let's play around with some other models. And then once that's all done, you want to be able to interact with it. Again, going back to that point that if you really want to comprehend your data, you need to be able to slice and dice it. Now, the good news is that if you take kind of the full analytics approach that we're talking through and you're doing it against Dynamics, most of these stages are already done. So acquire, parse, and mine. You're using a financial system to pull in all that data. That data probably already exists for you. It already is organized out. It already has meaning. So stages 1, 2, and 4 are already relevant. And then stages 5, 6, and 7, if you have kind of a full analytics approach, it's going to be easy for the end user to actually represent that, organize it, and then interact with it. But what's really going to be critical, and I'm going to argue this here, is that stage 3 is still critical. Doesn't matter how your information's set up. If you already have your information, and it doesn't even matter if you have a front-end tool, you can easily interact with it. The fact that you need to have some sort of filtering or data governance or data management policy is really going to be critical here. That'll take us to our next slide. This is kind of why I argue that data management is important. The first is, you're going to have a large amount of data volume, and there's going to be some data changes. So first of all, you think about data volume, you're going to have more and more information over the next few years. There's going to be more business applications that are going to be released. They're going to have more data about your business that you are going to want to use to drive better decisions. And so just inherently, you'll have more data to work with. And this is not only going to be easier, I'm going to argue it's going to be mandatory, because if you are competing against somebody that knows more about their customers or their suppliers or their business than you, they have a good edge up to compete over you. So pretty much everybody's going to be trying to get as much data as they can. You also see that businesses will change over time. Obviously, as you're pulling in that data, you need to have some sort of data management policy to react to those changes. And the same thing, you might change just how you do things internally. Maybe you'll change how you put together commission for your salespeople, or you'll change how you expense something. You need to have a system in place so that as you're looking at your historical data, you can easily reflect those changes in one location. And then going back to kind of that first point, the data is going to come from different sources. Again, I threw out a couple of examples here: SQL, non-SQL. The big ones really, I think, being in the future, and I know Matthew will argue this, are APIs and web services, so going against cloud-based applications. But the fact that it's all in different sources means you need to have some sort of data management strategy to connect to those different data sources. And you have to realize that sometimes they might not all be in the relational format. So SQL, which is what most of the Dynamics systems are in, are going to be in sort of a table and field format. But maybe you need to connect against something that isn't in that format. You need to have a strategy to be able to go in and tie that together. And then your data is going to be imperfect. So there's always going to be errors. I was kind of looking into some examples of some errors that we've seen. This actually came from a good blog that a guy named Randy Awu does. So he does much more complex data visualization for Google. But we see the same thing at Jet all the time. You might see folks like internal users who are using their information for testing. You might see employees or friends of the business as an example of imperfect data. Maybe you'll have strategic partners. You have one partner that's a large portion of your business. Now, how are you going to actually effectively reflect that? Same thing with reseller accounts. Maybe you have a reseller account that effectively is 50 accounts worth of activity. How do you reflect that? Even stuff like calendars can be fairly challenging if you're trying to figure out how to line everything up. So you're always going to have these challenges, and you need to address them. That's the reason why on this last point here, unmanaged data is worse than no data. I really can't say too much about that. I think that's pretty self-apparent. If you are going through and you are making business decisions on data that potentially could be bad, a lot of the times that's worse than making business decisions without any data. And we'll actually show an example here that Matthew put together of a example of a report that's put together without a data governance strategy. And you can see those pitfalls that can go in and happen as you're going through the process. So what's the solution? This is where we're going to have an ETL process. And this is something that we really focus on. It's something that, as a whole, it's going to be critical to kind of deploy everything out. So ETL, extract, transform, and load. Extract, I want to pull information from my data or my data sources. So like we talked about, maybe we have solutions that have multiple data sources. We need to know how to pull that all together. Transform, I only want to pull in what's relevant, and I need to create a relationship between the data. So again, I want to be able to filter some of this out in, for example, a staging database. And then I want to see how do those two systems react, or how do those two systems relate. And I want to set that calculation or that relationship up in one single location. If I'm looking at CRM data and Dynamics data, I want to know, okay, what's the shared field there? How do we relate those? And are we running that logic across all the information that we're pulling in? And then once that transformation process is done, they can then be loaded out to specific systems for consumption. The examples we're going to use today are like a data warehouse or cubes, and we'll talk through why those will be a little bit easier to actually consume that data. So you can see, again, we've got the ETL process. We start over here on the left. This is really going to be our kind of raw data, and so this could be our whole technology stack. We've got Dynamics maybe on the top. Maybe we've got some other systems that we're pulling in. And Dynamics, for example, it's in a relational format. So it's all tables and fields. It is designed to store information. It's not necessarily designed to pull that information back out. So what pushing this information through this ETL process is going to do is just make it a lot easier to go in and consume that. We start over here, go through the database or databases format, and we push these into the data warehouse. Again, we can have multiple systems. We can have everything set up so that it doesn't necessarily relate to each other, but as it goes into the data warehouse, we make that connection between that data, and now we have data from multiple sources that's pulling from a large amount of our data sources. For example, like, we have a data warehouse that pulls from 6 different tables inside of Dynamics. So I can pull in all that information, tie it together. It's going to be a lot easier to consume because all that information's pre-related, and we're only pulling in what's relevant. This is typically where most BI vendors stop. I argue that I think, really to get a good dashboarding process, you want to have stuff like OLAP cubes, which is what we'll show here. This will factor in dimensionality, which means if I want to do a really complex example, I can build it up instantly. If I want to look at sales by item category, broken down by year, broken down by posting date, I can do that instantly, and then I can slice and dice it any way that I want. Think about that slicing and dicing piece. That's really what's going to be critical to have a good data visualization practice, is the fact that information can be dove into and you can go in and interact with it very effectively. And the fact that it's all going to be very fast and pre-calculated is also critical. I don't need to wait for an updated dashboard to run. That information's already there instantly and it's ready to go. And the last piece, we've got calculations, so you can actually have pre-calculated KPIs in here and they're set up and ready to run. So we can go in and set a KPI so that if I go into an example, there is one calculation that everybody is using. We don't have multiple calculations that we're going through. Again, you can kind of see what that deployment looks like through all the different systems, through an ETL tool, which is really what I think is critical to making this deployment very quick. A data warehouse automation tool or an ETL tool allows you to make all of those changes between those different tables and fields in a point-and-click interface as opposed to having somebody manually write out SQL code. So it makes it much quicker to develop that out, makes it a lot quicker, and then those can be pushed into cubes. Once those are in an Excel add-in, you could look at stuff like Power BI, which we'll show, or even Excel Online. So looking at JET, the stuff that kind of sets us apart in this space is, again, we have an ETL tool or a data warehouse automation tool. It's called the JET Data Manager. Matthew will show a little bit of that today. And you'll see those changes are able to be made very quickly because they're in a point-and-click interface. And it's going to be basically 5 to 7 times faster than any other solution. So you can build customizations quickly. We also start with the pre-built project. So we're not starting at square 0. We're starting at square 8 for getting folks started. And we've got a pre-built data warehouse. We've got some pre-built cubes. We know what Dynamics and users use out of the box, so we tie all of that information together and have it up and running. And then that can be installed in a couple of hours. And then you can go in and use the data warehouse automation tool to make a few customizations. So those are specifically for your business. You're not trying to use cubes that were designed for somebody else. You can have a system that is specifically set up for you, and then you can consume that any way that you want. Again, data visualization being critical, so the fact that you can easily connect this into Power BI is really going to be important. So I'm sorry I went through on the slides. I know this is the stuff that I get really excited about, but I'm actually going to pull up a couple examples here. First thing I think I'm going to pull out is actually just kind of showing how quick this evaluation, or how quickly you can pull information out of a system with analytics. So you can see here, same format here. And in JET, again, we're just doing this inside of Excel. So Excel, again, can be used as a really good data visualization tool. And again, the strength of the cubes is dimensionality. You'll see pretty quickly how this can be carried over to data visualization. But I can grab whatever information I want. So if I want to grab sales, or I want to grab cost, or I want to grab profit, or I want to grab profit percentage, I can do that instantly. And then if I want to grab item category, I can tie that together. If I want to grab posting date, I can tie that together. Look at subcategories. I can look at specific items. And the fact I have all this at my fingertips and I can instantly grab what I need makes this very effective. I can slice and dice by different salespeople. And let's maybe slice and dice by location. So you see it. I've got that dimensionality to an extreme level that I have all these different measures and dimensions pulled in here, but I can see them easily. And then I can easily interact with them. So I can take that graph here and I can go say, let's look at this, let's look at this. And we're already set up and ready to go. So we get that visualization. So again, this is a bit more of a complex example, but you can see how easy this makes building dashboards. This is actually one of our pre-built dashboards that ships out of the box. And you'll see this was built in a matter of clicks. I've got profit, I've got sales amount, I've got item category, and we've got those across a couple different tabs here. And then we can jump into our sales dashboard here, and I can go in and I can easily interact with this. So I can go in here, and let's say I just want to look at North America sales. I can do that. And this will take a second because I just opened this up, but then I can easily consume that. And now I can easily slice and dice this depending on what I'm looking for. And maybe, the example I always like showing here is, hey, let's grab salesperson on document. Let's look at these 4 salespeople. Let's isolate bags and totes. And wow, you can see that Annette is the only one selling bags and totes. So we can see kind of what's going on there. So again, this ability to slice and dice data, this ability to get that 80% retention where you're seeing and doing is all because of the back-end model of tying everything together and easily being able to consume this. Yeah, Excel, we talked about being a good data visualization tool. A good alternative here might be something like Power BI. And again, Power BI is Microsoft's flagship data visualization tool. So I'll open this up. And the challenge we see with Power BI is that, if an end user wants to go in and wants to start building out dashboards, they're going to have to do that from scratch. So they go in here, as soon as they open it up, they get this blank screen unless you have some dashboards already put together, and they need to go in and get data. If I go directly into my SQL server and I want to pull everything in, I can hit enter, and you'll see if I'm going directly against the data source, we've got a couple examples here. I've got GPE, I've got NAV, we've got AX in here. Let's take a look at the NAV instance that we should have. There's a couple different ones. We'll pull up this one. This is another example. You can go in and see, okay, this is going to be fairly complex as I go through. I have to know the tables and fields to get this all tied together. This might actually take a second. This is actually going to start slowing down my computer as I try to pull in different tables and fields. So fairly difficult. Now, alternatively, if I have a data model already set up, I can connect to that instantly. So same thing, we go in here. But on this one, let's grab kind of some of our cubes. And these are actually combination. We've got NAV, but we've got some AX data all tied together here. And you can see now I can start building out a dashboard pretty much instantly. I can say I want to grab my sales amount. And I'd like to grab my item category. And I can drag that down, and then I want to grab sales amount. And maybe I want to look at posting date. And I can drag that down, and then maybe I want to go in and grab, same thing, sales amount. And on this one, let's say maybe I want to look at salesperson. I can do that, and I can use a different graph. Then maybe I want to do something a bit more of a complex data visualization. I want to go in and I want to grab profit percentage, and I want to look at where our most profitable customers are. And it doesn't make sense to look at that in a graph, so let's look at it in a map. This is really where Power BI is going to excel. The fact that I can easily get these rich data visualizations and see this information in a format that isn't typical of just graphs. And then the last thing I always like to throw in here are some KPIs. Again, in JET, these are just pre-calculated values. So that eliminates a lot of the risk around KPI creation and maintenance. Is because you're using one system. Everybody has that same calculation. If you go through and you manually write these into a report, there's always the chance that maybe two people have two different reports where they've done slightly different calculations. All of a sudden, you're making assumptions off of two disparate sets of information. So again, you can see this. The nice part about Power BI is the user interface. You can see I can click right through this and really interact with my data. I can get that retention because I can get into some of these details. I specifically like some of the drill down functionality, and you can play around with, kind of how this is set up and what information this carries over depending on what you're looking at. And so with that being said, and this is the front end, Matthew, are you available to kind of do a quick overview of the JET Data Manager for the next 10 minutes?
Absolutely.
Perfect. I will hand this over to you here.
Okay.
And you might need to just request. There you go.
Okay, I think I did it. Are you seeing my screen?
I am.
Okay, great.
And one thing I want to just preface for everybody on the call, what Matthew is showing is the ETL tool I talked about, so the JET Data Manager. And the good news here, because I know a few of you probably, especially if you're finance folks, are saying, hey, this looks pretty technical. The good news here is that, this is really something that Optimus can go in and make most of the changes in the interactions here. Or if you have a technical resource, if you have somebody that's specifically, has a BI skill set, they can go in and use this tool. But the nice part here is you can see kind of how quickly some of those changes might be deployed. Or I think, Matthew, I think we were talking about maybe having you, if you could just show how a KPI could be built out or a calculation could be built out.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, thanks, John. So what we're looking at here is called the JET Data Manager, or sometimes I'll call it the JDM. And this is our ETL automation tool. Like John mentioned, ETL standing for extract, transform, and load. So let's start with the E part, the extract. I'm going to double click on business unit here. So a couple of things worth noting here is we refer to this whole, excuse me, this whole process as a project. And what I've done is I've downloaded our base Dynamics AX project from our Cube store. So what you're looking at is a compilation of probably 85 to 90% of the data points that you would need, in a regular AX environment. And that's already done for you. Okay, so that's pre-packaged here. So that's a huge head start when you start putting together your BI environment. A lot of this work is already done for you. Okay? And if any of you have ever looked at the AX, the tables in the database, it can be pretty daunting. There's a ton of them in there. I want to say like the latest version has almost 7,000 tables in it. There's a lot of different linking and mapping that has to happen to get your information out. So that being said, a lot of that is already done. So here's the data source area. We can connect to pretty much anything with the JDM. Right now what I've got here, there we go, is I've got an AX adapter connection. So what we've done is we've written specific adapters for some of the Dynamics ERP systems, AX being one of them. So you load up the adapter, you give it your parameters, you tell it where the database is, what server you're using, a couple other setup steps. It knows things about your AX environment, like which companies are which and how to interact with that data at that level. So I'll just show you a little bit here. These are all of some of the different connections that we can use other than our adapters. Okay, so we've got SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, a lot of the basic ones, obviously text files and Excel files we can connect to. But we can also connect to anything OLADB or ODBC compliant. That's for those of you that don't know, that's a standard in the industry for data connections. We also partner with a company called CData, and they specialize in different connections for different systems. So a lot of times, especially with the advent of the cloud revolution, you know, everything is going to the cloud. Well, if you have a system in the cloud, you don't necessarily have access to that back-end data. You don't have a direct connection to that database anymore. Oftentimes, the cloud provider will give you some type of web-based connection method so that you can extract your data in that way. So we can use one of those CData connectors to utilize that type of connection and pull that data out. Okay. So on the left-hand side, this is really easy to work with. I'm just double-clicking here on the customer table in AX. I've got some of the fields selected, not all of them, but on the right-hand side, I've got a list of all of the fields, okay? And the ones with the checks on them are the ones that I've already pulled in. The reason I'm showing this is just to show how easy it is to add different data points, all right? Like I said, we probably got 85 or 90% of the way here, but adding that additional 10 or 15% is pretty easy, especially if you're going against the same database. You know, currency code here, I could click there. That brings it into the system, okay? Some other things that we can do, we could bring in perhaps a legacy ERP system. I've got a NAV legacy database connected here. So a lot of our customers will decide to, when they upgrade, maybe they have a leftover ERP system, maybe QuickBooks or NAV or GP or something like that. And maybe they don't want to bring all that history over into their new ERP. So what we can do is we can connect to that old system, pull the data in and store it in the data warehouse. And so the data is still online and available for reporting, but you don't have to necessarily keep that ERP system online anymore. Okay. So up here in our staging area, this is the transform. This is the T in ETL. This is probably where, you know, most of the work happens, most of the magic happens here. If you think about it, when you're pulling in data, especially from two different systems, for instance, the chances of that data just automatically, magically fitting together are pretty slim. You know, we typically have to do some things to it. Maybe change the type of field, the data type that a field is, or change how different things link together. That's what we do in the staging area. But again, it's typically drag and drop functionality using the JDM tool here. Huge time saver. All of this process is going to be scripted out and just deployed off to the Microsoft environment in the background. Okay? So that's another thing worth noting here. All of this that you're seeing, the output is going to be a straight Microsoft SQL Server database. There's nothing proprietary about it. And also a set of Microsoft Analysis Services cubes. So that's one of the reasons why we're compatible with so many different systems, is because we're not going to lock down that back end for you. We don't require you to use our reporting tool to connect to our data warehouse, for instance. We would like you to, and it's optimized to do that. But you can also use other tools, for instance, to connect to the cubes. You know, you can use your Power BI. You can use anything that can consume that kind of data, we can utilize in our environment, okay? So I'm going to double click on the data warehouse here. I'll close down my staging. These are the actual data warehouse tables. And as you can see, they're named more user-friendly. They're named proper case. I'll double click on the customer table here. You've got all of the fields here. So this is the end user facing interface here. So when you go in to report maybe creating a group of fields, the end user doesn't have to know that we compiled this information from multiple fields, okay, multiple fields from multiple tables, okay? That's all transparent. So once we have our data warehouse set, what we've done is we've created a set of analysis services cubes from those. Okay? So here's the cubes. And again, might not mean something to someone that doesn't work in this environment, but just suffice it to say, building these cubes is very labor intensive. There's a lot of programming that goes into it, a lot of scripting, things like that. The JDM does all of that for you. So again, it's just a matter of usually just click and drag or point and click. Here's all the measures that John was showing you how to drag in different numbers and different ways to slice and dice numbers. Here's where we create those. Okay, so as you can see, this sales cube is what I'm using as an example here. We've got lots and lots of default information there already. It's very easy to add additional information. We can add just basic measures that just pull numbers over, maybe a calculation on the way, maybe one number multiplied by another number in the system to give us a particular measure. We can do all of that stuff. Okay. We can also utilize what's called a snippet. Snippets are used to create more complex measures. Like a good example that I always like to bring up is these time-sensitive measures, because these calculations can be kind of complex. So if I want to do let's see, a rolling 12 months, for instance, I can go in here and it brings this template up as kind of a placeholder, kind of like a wizard, and you just fill in the information and you just feed it these parameters, and then it will build that formula for you. Okay. Couple other things real quick. The system comes with the full ability to design a security model around all of this. And again, the JDM is allowing you to do that, and it's sending that off to the Microsoft stack in the background. So we're using SQL Server security and SSAS security. But the tool allows you to design it very easily. So we can lock down particular tables in the environment, particular fields. For instance, I mean, you could do it on a global level. Like this group has access to the sales cube, but if you're not in that group, you won't even see it. Okay. We can even go down even further than that. We can lock down different data points within different objects, like something called row level security. So for instance, maybe you had a group of salespeople and you only wanted them to see the data that's in their sales territory. We could set all of that up on the back end here in the JDM, send that off to your Microsoft database in your cubes, and then any report that consumes those things, that uses those things as a data source, that security is going to follow. Okay, so I think that's about all I had on my list to cover here. John, did you have anything else that you wanted me to show real quick before
I think that's great. I know we've got kind of a good time limit here, so if you want to toss it back to me, I've got that one last example that you actually built out, and then we can go to questions for everybody.
Sure. Okay. I think you can just go ahead and click on the your share button, and then it will just tell you it's going to take the share over from me.
Let me see if I can figure this one out. There we go. Perfect. Well, again, thank you, Matthew. And again, we have one more example here, and then I've got a couple minutes for questions. And then lo and behold, actually, the Optimus team has pulled me into another demo, so I do have to jump out of here pretty quickly. So I'll talk through this example. If you have any questions, feel free to start sending them right now, and Matthew and I will kind of address those. And then if you want to do any follow-up, again, the team at Optimus is great. they can help you with that process. So the example we wanted to show, and Matthew did a great job putting this together, is what happens if you don't have a data governance strategy. And so here, this is actually a report, Matthew, you built out against, it was a, Dynamics Nav instance and a data warehouse, correct?
Yes.
And so tell me about, I mean, what tables did you grab from just the Dynamics database versus the data warehouse? How do these differ?
Yeah, so on the top represents the governed data, okay? So that's coming from the data warehouse. And on the bottom represents the ungoverned. So basically just a user, the scenario is a user just going directly against the database and choosing tables. So in Dynamics Nav in particular, when you're pulling out posted sales transactions, you're actually pulling that information out from multiple tables. I think there's six or seven different tables. Well, your base user isn't necessarily going to know that or know how all that fits together. So in this scenario, I believe the bottom, they're grabbing it from just the regular sales invoice header. And on the top, they're grabbing it from the data warehouse in a table called posted sales transactions. So what we've already done is we've compiled the correct linking and everything, and we've just presented it as the one table. So as you can see, we're running the same report for the same group of customers, but with drastically different results.
Yep.
And that's because of the data governance.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Matthew. And yeah, I think it's probably pretty apparent of how, if you're running your business against that bottom example that's incorrect, you can see all the potentials for mistakes you can make. If this is a customer, all of a sudden, maybe you are giving Carl Anthony a much better rate than they probably actually deserve, just given how some of that information is set up and structured out. So again, I've got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to pause just to see if there are any other questions here. So we'll see if we've got any set up here. Like I said, let me know if you have any. And it looks like we've got an AX user kind of wondering about the pre-built projects here. Matthew, what are the pre-built cubes in AX that we already have? Do we have any?
We do. We've got AP, AR, finance, inventory, purchasing, and sales. And then also we have kind of a different flavor of the download. We add production or manufacturing, and we also have a limited project and fixed assets.
Yeah. So.
And again, those are all the base project that you're downloading, but it's all completely customizable, as you saw. So that last 10 or 15% is used to customize to your specific needs.
Perfect. And I think that's always kind of critical, specifically for us. I know we've run up against other BI vendors, and they'll have a lot of people trying to use just the out of the box process, but it's those last customizations that are really going to help you get the most out of your investment. And because of the Jet Data Manager and the fact that we can deploy those very quickly, also the fact that you all would be working with a really great partner, Optimus, that's going to just make that a really effective route to go here. So pause for a couple more minutes. I don't think we have any other questions, so I might let everybody go a couple minutes early. If you have questions, again, reach out to the team at Optimus. I'm sure Vishal can direct you to the appropriate folks. If you want to see a more in-depth demo of Jet, again, we're happy to get that set up. If you have kind of other questions around Power BI, reach out to the Optimus team. They can definitely give you some good options. But other than that, I'm going to let everybody go back to their day. Matthew, thank you again for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Hope you have a great day.